I am going to be talking about promoting health and well-being through horticulture. And what I'll do is the outline of my presentation, I'll give some definitions of some of the terms that we'll be using and talk a little bit about what is the evidence for the impact of horticulture on health and well-being, which will be followed by Denver Botanica, some of the programs that we do at Denver Botanic Gardens. So we'll start with the definitions, and I'm going to give you some definitions for what is horticulture, what is gardening, biophilia, hortophilia, horticultural therapy, and definitions for health and well-being. So horticulture, if you look at the Merriam-Webster's dictionary, horticulture is defined as the science and art of cultivating fruits, vegetables, flowers, and plants. So within horticulture itself, there are the science of all the different subsections within horticulture. The olericulture is the cultivation of vegetables. Pomology is the cultivation of fruits. And those together then lead to the food science. And then ornamental horticulture consists of nursery horticulture, floristry, floriculture, and landscape horticulture, which is the cultivating of the flowers and plants like trees, shrubs, all of that. And then there is also turf grass. So within the plant science and agricultural sciences, horticulture is one of the agricultural sciences. So you also, as a horticulturist, you also need to know other like soil biology, soil chemistry, pests and diseases, plant pathology, entomology. So all those are disciplines within horticulture that any horticulturist needs to be aware of. And so gardening is more of an activity, the activity of practicing horticulture. And so the activity in which people grow, cultivate, and take care of plants, which is flowers and vegetables for non-commercial uses, is what is defined as gardening. And I'm not sure how many of you have heard the term biophilia. It was originally coined by Eric Fromm, and then it was made popular by Edward Wilson, who was an entomologist. And he even wrote a whole book called Biophilia. So biophilia is, so we as humans have this innate nature, this innate need to love nature and anything living. And it is our connection as humans that we have subconsciously that we seek to have a relationship with the rest of life, be it plants or animals. So that is what is termed as biophilia. And then from biophilia, Oliver Sacks, who was a neurologist, came up with the term hortophilia, which is the love of gardening. Hortophilia is the love of gardening, which takes care of the life of plant and the innate need to nurture and create through gardening. So when you talk about horticulture as the science and art of growing plants and plants, so this is the nurturing and creating the art part of it. You want to create something artful is what is hortophilia. So like comparing biophilia and hortophilia. So biophilia, it's the love for nature and anything living, hiking, camping, nature therapy, healing landscapes, public parks, activities in public parks, all of that fall under biophilia. And anything when you are engaged in gardening, landscaping, horticultural therapy, and horticultural therapy landscapes, community gardens, all that fall under hortophilia. So what is horticultural therapy? So the American Horticultural Therapy Association, AHTA, they have defined horticulture therapy as the participation in horticultural activities. And this is facilitated by a registered horticultural therapist to achieve specific goals within an established treatment, rehabilitation, or vocational plan. So the AHTA offers horticultural therapy certification. So you need to be certified to perform these activities. So that is why they use a registered horticultural therapist for these activities as a treatment. So it is an active process, and it occurs in the context of an established treatment plan. And it is also a process where the process itself is considered a therapeutic activity rather than the end product. And then health. So this is the WHO definition of health, is the state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being. And it is not just merely the absence of a disease of infirmity. So it is a holistic look at our well-being. And so what is well-being? So well-being includes the presence of positive emotions and moods, that is contentment, happiness, and the absence of negative emotions, such as depression or anxiety, the satisfaction with life, and the fulfillment and positive functioning. So it is the stable well-being is when individuals have the psychological, social, and physical resources they need to meet a particular psychological, social, and or physical challenge. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about the evidence for the impact of horticulture on health and well-being. So if you look at us humans and human society and plants, we've had a long evolutionary relationship with plants. So when we were 10 to 12,000 years ago, we were a hunter-gatherer society where we hunted for animals and we would gather plant resources to feed ourselves. And about 11,000 years ago, a shift happened where we started cultivating plants and we became more of an agrarian society. And with the invent of agriculture, we became more sedentary, where from a nomadic lifestyle, when we were hunter-gatherers, we started settling in cities and towns and establishing farms around us for food production. And so there was even more availability of food for our sustenance. So that was a huge shift, and a civilization as we know today is because of agriculture and what it enabled us to do, where we could settle in place, and that allowed us to more creativity to the industrial revolution and now the technology revolution. So, what are the benefits of plants, and how have plants impacted human society? So plants provide us with food, fuel, medicines, all the clothing, cotton clothing we wear, fiber, ropes, and all sorts of fibers, and shelter, our homes made of wood, and just pure pleasure, like the ornamental horticulture, people, and which all leads to health and well-being. So there are many benefits of plants. So the benefits of plants to us can be quantified as economic, environmental, or health and well-being benefits. And eventually it leads to a better quality of life. And the quality of life can be physical, psychological, social, environmental, cognitive, or spiritual. And so what are some of the economic benefits of plants? So when you have, when you have a house surrounded by plants and trees, it does definitely increase your property value. And with trees around the house, you can have energy savings. And definitely for any city, the tourism value is a revenue and creates jobs. And also it can reduce healthcare costs. And then the environmental benefits of plants, it would reduce noise pollution, and also it can improve water quality by reducing stormwater runoff, and also by reducing soil erosion, and carbon sequestration that improves air quality, as well as it can attract wildlife and promote biodiversity, and also it offsets heat islands. I love this picture that I have where all those elephants are gathering under one shade tree. So not only do we need shade, but animals also need shade. So in big cities where we have created with these large buildings and asphalt everywhere, we have created these heat islands. So by planting trees, we can mitigate some of these heat islands. So when you look at the health and well-being benefits of plants, there is a whole laundry list of benefits that we humans derive from being with being with plants or engaging in gardening activities. And some of these reducing anxiety and stress. And by having proper nutrition, we can reduce obesity and improve self-esteem, enhanced immunity, increasing creativity, lower cardiovascular disease and risk and blood pressure, positive cognitive development. And then in neighborhoods where there is high crime, if it is a nicely planted neighborhood, it can reduce crime. So there are so many benefits. So how do you document? I mean, there are all these benefits, but what is the evidence that there is benefit of using plants, and how do you know that there is this benefit? So the way to document evidence is you really need to show the link. So the evidence must document a systematic relationship, the benefits systematically measured under varying amounts of contact with nature or gardening or plants, or whatever your intervention is. And the more contact with nature, the more the benefits, and the less contact with nature, the less the benefits. So first of all, you need to document evidence, you need to show the link. And then you need to show that the link is real, that the researcher who is trying to document this needs to show that the link is real and it is not just in the perceptions of the researcher. And then we need to show that the link is causal. So we need to prove the cause and effect link between the intervention and the benefit. And then we have to be able to explain the link. What is the plausible, scientifically defensible explanation for this benefit? So research can apply large sample sizes with multiple outcome measures and a diversity of settings and populations. But in reality, no single study can employ all these variables. Hence, we really need a cluster of studies that can compellingly show the consistency of nature benefit link. And so the way we researchers have done this is the evidence can be generated through review articles and meta-analysis. And so the methodology that is used to undertake a scoping review or a meta-analysis is called PRISMA. PRISMA stands for Preferred Reporting Items for Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. So the main steps involved in PRISMA are you really first need to identify what is your research question. And then once you know what the research question are, then you need to identify the relevant studies. So typically you go to different research websites where the papers, you can find the Web of Science, Scopus. So there are those different platforms from which you can download many of these studies once you have your key search words. And then you select the studies. And then once you have selected the studies, you chart the data, and then you collate, summarize, and report the results, and then you provide the consultation. So this is an example, Howard et al., this study that was published last year. It was a scoping review. The study was, what is the evidence for the impact of gardens and gardening on health and well-being? And it was a scoping review on evidence-based logic model to guide healthcare strategy decision-making on the use of gardening approaches as a social prescription. So they started, once they had the research question identified, they started with 8,896 publications. And then they found the duplicates and brought it down to 7,892. And then once they did the screening, they excluded 7,799, and it came down to 183 review papers. And then they again looked through the eligibility to see which ones really qualified for this specific review. And then they ended up with 77 studies. And so based on that 77 studies, they developed a logic model. They developed two different logic models, one to see the contribution of gardens to mental health, and the other one was a contribution of gardens to general health well-being. So for this, what they did was the parameters that they set for this mental well-being included four main areas of interest, which was psychological well-being, depression, anxiety, and mental status. And the mental status included pathological disorders such as dementia, schizophrenia, bipolar, and other chronic long-term conditions. And so from the review that they did, the evidence from their review indicated a range of benefits from gardening on diverse populations. So typically in this, from their review that they did, gardening enabled greater social interaction with others and improved physical activity, improving overall mental well-being, reducing depression and anxiety. So the causal relationship, they illustrated it using their logic model. So the logic model, they talk about the inputs. You have the different types of gardens, and then the activity, the different types of gardening activity, and the output was improved mental health. And in the outcomes, it was the mental, physiological, as well as social and physical. So that gives like a prescription for healthcare providers. If they want a reduced, like increased, improved mood, so then you can look at which activities within here, what are the type of gardens that you can use and what type of gardening activities, so you can have that outcome. So this logic model provides a resource for practitioners of therapeutic horticulture or healthcare providers on selecting an activity to get a certain outcome. And then the same researchers also did, this was the second logic model for the contribution of gardens to health and well-being in general. So they're also the same input activity. So it could be food growing or general gardening, or even just walking through a botanic garden. And the output was healthier adults, healthier children, improved mental health, improved quality of life for patients with dementia. And then the outcomes had also social, mental, physical, or general health and well-being. And then this is another study that was done by Oli et al. And they were looking at school gardens and reviewing systematic review of health and well-being impacts of school gardening to generate qualitative and quantitative evidence. And so here they used, if you look at, here also the different type of logic model to look at intermediate to long-term final outcomes. So if we take the first example, growing and nurturing crops to produce food, and the activity is to connect with cultural heritage and local foods, and which leads to these school children knowledge and awareness of where food comes from, and then improved attitudes towards food, for example, willingness to try new foods, as well as, and then the final long-term outcome would be healthier eating habits, including more fruits and vegetables. So I think these logic models help by doing a review, scoping review or meta-analysis, you can draw evidence of the impacts of horticulture, gardening, or nature therapy on the well-being, the health and well-being benefits. And so I just wanted to show, I mean, this past year with COVID-19, there have been a lot of people who have resorted to going back to gardening. I mean, with our urban population, we've been so removed from gardening and agriculture that we have forgotten how to dig the earth and grow something. And there is so much satisfaction it brings us when you grow something and you cultivate, like if you're growing a tomato, and the tomato, once you grow it, there is so much pleasure in harvesting the tomato and consuming the tomato. So these are from different publication sources, where the Financial Times, how coronavirus changed gardening forever. And then Food Tank, how gardening promotes mental health during COVID-19. And Market Watch, why gardening during a pandemic is so comforting. There are certain very stabilizing forces in gardening that can ground us when we are feeling shaky. So, I mean, we are, as the definition of biophilia and hortophilia, like we are innately connected with nature and activities in nature. And I think it has taken the COVID-19 to open our eyes to what we have been missing in our lives through an urban lifestyle. And so more and more people are now turning into gardening for solace and to get back to our roots, where, I mean, from a hunter-gatherer society, we have always been connected with plants and nature. So this has really changed how we look at our lifestyles and having that connection with nature. And so now I'm going to talk about some of the programs that we do at Denver Botanic Gardens. And so we have a sensory garden as part of a garden. So this is a unique garden that utilizes architectural features and sensory nature of plants to enable people of all activities and abilities to interact with these plants. So we also use specialized gardening techniques. So a lot of these our planting beds are accessible by wheelchair and people with disabilities, and so that it minimizes barriers and maximizes people's ability. So these are some of the plants that are like the sensory garden plants. So if you look at the sensitive plant, I mean, I growing up in India, this was all over the place. And as a child, I always loved stepping on it because as soon as you touch it, it closes immediately. So as a kid, I grew up playing with these plants. And then another one is the touch me not, where it's a balsam or impatiens, where tropical impatiens, where once the fruit is fully mature, you touch the fruit, it bursts open and the seeds pop out. So these are all sensory experience that, I mean, from a childhood, you just carry it with you as you are growing up. And the peppermint geranium smells so good when you touch the lemon balm. So you touch the leaf and you smell, those are all sensory experiences. And then we offer different programs. The Summer Sensory Program is a program that we offer on site, and it serves an aging population and people with cognitive or physical disabilities. And we host it in our sensory garden on site. And it features activities that stimulate senses in our participants as they are interacting with or working with these plants. And those activities are meant to evoke memories and to generate joy and tranquility and foster a sense of well-being among the participants. And another program we do is what we call Winter Green. And this one is during the winter months where people with disabilities are unable to come to the botanic garden. So we take these programs to these nursing care facilities. So it's a plant-based therapeutic activity focused program. And it assists with, it also works, we also work with an aging population with this, and it provides to the assisted living, skilled nursing, memory care facilities, and community centers. And this, like the summer sensory also evokes memories and creates joy and fosters a sense of well-being among the participants. And this is a program we have developed in collaboration with the Alzheimer's Association and the Colorado chapter. And it offers participants with mild memory loss to explore the world of plants in an interactive environment. So it also integrates their multiple senses and allows them to become creative and engaged with activities, plant-focused activities. And then another program that we are working with the Rocky Mountain Cancer Centers is using the art of bonsai. And this is an all-day intensive beginning bonsai course. And the participants have an activity to create their own bonsai that they can take back with them. And while they are working on the tree, what they are experiencing is they are experiencing this connection between the journey of the tree and the journey of life, so that they can take it back. So the bonsai acts as a metaphor for life itself, and so that they can use it in their own life to see what is the journey of the tree. And another program that we are working also with the Rocky Mountain Cancer Centers is meditative walks, and where it combines gentle movements and self-reflection to help on a path to recovery. So we offer 4 sessions, and it draws on the wisdom of nature's 4 seasons to guide participants towards healing and growth. And another activity we do is low sensory morning. So before we open, for especially those who have autism or who do not like all the sensory activities around them, this is very helpful to them. So this is during the summer season, and people who prefer this quiet, less crowded environment, it offers them a really quiet time in the gardens before we open to the public. And then finally, another thing is we have volunteers, interns, and we also have a vocational program. And we work with, we have a collaboration with an organization called Possibility Pool. And we employ 1 or 2 groundskeepers every year to work with us in the garden. And it also provides a space for them, for those with cognitive or physical disabilities, to work in the garden and also learn the value of gardening, and helps them develop job-related skills. And also volunteers also in the sensory garden work in a highly supportive environment, making it accessible for them. And they also have access to adaptable tools, which helps them to be successful while performing these garden tasks. And so we also provide internship opportunities for students who are in a horticultural therapy program, or they need to become certified as an American Horticultural Therapy Association certification as a certified horticultural therapist. They need to have so many hours of in-person training where they're doing programs, hands-on programming. So we provide internship opportunities for students who need to have that hands-on training as part of their certification process. And then finally, we also offer horticultural therapy services, where we are in the community. We can, if any organization wants to program design for them, we work with those organizations to customize a program for them. And we develop a curriculum, and then the programs can take in at their facility or at the Denver Botanic Gardens. And also, making the most of your garden. If you have a garden and if you have therapy goals in the garden, we come and help you develop those goals. And so you can adapting maintenance schedules and garden activities for maximum participation. And we assist with plant selection with the horticultural therapy in mind, if it's vegetable garden, sensory garden, indoor plants, whatever. And also we can consult on designing and building accessible gardens. And so with that, I want to really, if you look at horticulture as the science and art of cultivating fruits and vegetables and flowers. But Diane Ralph is a professor at Virginia Tech. She's a horticultural therapy professor, and she has done a lot of work on horticultural therapy. And she, in one of her papers, she redefined horticulture as the science and art of growing flowers, fruits, vegetables, trees, and shrubs, resulting in the development of minds and emotions of individuals, the enrichment and health of communities, and the integration of the garden in the breadth of modern civilization. And I love this definition because in our modern world, we really need to have plants help us in developing our minds and emotions, because it has, we already have evidence that plants and horticulture and gardening can help us as individuals as well as communities. So we really need to integrate gardens in our modern civilization. And I'm going to, this is Oliver Sacks, his opinion piece, The Healing Power of Gardens, was published in the New York Times, April 18, 2019. I would encourage all of you, I have the link there, but even if you just Google Oliver Sacks and gardening or power of plants, power of gardens, you will find this beautiful article. And I would suggest all of you read that article. And he died in 2015, so this must have been an opinion piece that he wrote earlier that was republished in the New York Times. So I'm going to just read off this quotation from that article in the New York Times. And what he says is, clearly, nature calls to something very deep in us. Biophilia, the love of nature and living things, is an essential part of the human condition. Hortophilia, because he's the one who defined the term hortophilia, the desire to interact with, manage, and tend nature is also deeply instilled in us. The role that nature plays in health and healing becomes even more critical for people working long days in windowless offices, for those living in city neighborhoods without access to green spaces, for children in city schools, or for those in institutional settings such as nursing homes. The effects of nature's qualities on health are not only spiritual and emotional, but physical and neurological. I have no doubt that they reflect deep changes in the brain's physiology and perhaps even its structure. So, very poignant quotation from Oliver Sacks on the benefits of plants and gardening. And with that, I am going to stop this video. So we have some meditative walk videos that we have developed at the Botanic Gardens. And I just want all of you to relax. And as I'm playing this, just be immersed in this virtual meditative walk. And I want to know if any of you feel some type of, if this helps you relax at the end of it. So I'm going to turn this on.
I offer the invitation of engaging with gentle movement. Let's take a few deep breaths here to settle into the practice. If slow, long breaths don't feel right for you right now, you're welcome to breathe normally and bring your attention to the imagery on the screen. As you're taking these breaths, the invitation is to check in with yourself. Not trying to change or judge anything here, but just noticing the sensations of the body. Now, I invite you to explore a little bit of movement. Focus on your shoulders, bringing them up closer to the ears during an inhale, and gently lower your shoulders during the exhale. Let's do that 2 more times. Inhale, shoulders up, and then a gentle exhale, shoulders down. And let's do that 1 more time. If it's accessible to you, I invite you to raise your arms up over your head or out to the sides, creating a gentle stretch. You can use an inhale and exhale here to coordinate with the movement. Inhale, keeping your attention purely in movement up or down or out with your arms. And exhale, letting the arms come down or back in. 1 more time, the arms move away from your body, a gentle stretch, staying focused on the sensation. And then with an exhale, bring the arms back alongside the body. Next, I invite you to imagine yourself in the gardens, immersed in these images. Feel the air on your skin. Imagine the scent of the air. Be with the sensations associated with these images. I invite you now to move in any way that feels comfortable. It could be shifting your head from side to side. It could be staying still. It could be stretching the hands or legs. Whatever for you in this moment feels good and keeps you connected here to these sensations. Now let's begin to shift back into the day. Taking a breath or two as we conclude this practice. Thank you for joining us.
Okay, so hopefully all of you are much more when you came into this. Did I lose that? Okay. Hopefully all of you are much more relaxed now than when you came into this presentation by watching that short video, that meditative walk. So anyway, I wanted to go to the last slide, where if you need information to contact us about. Good. Okay, I think that's, I'm going to stop sharing. So if you need to contact either myself, or we have a therapeutic horticultural therapy, a certified horticultural therapist is Angie Andrade. So we'll be happy to, if any of you need to talk about horticultural therapy, we can be here to provide that. So with that, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to have me come and speak to you. And hi, Mark, how are you?
I'm good, Sarada. How are you doing?
I'm doing good, thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I missed the way beginning of your presentation. I'm presently working in the intensive care unit, and there was an unstable patient that I had to take care of. So I apologize for being late, but I caught the vast majority of it, and it's wonderful work. It's just really great. There are a few questions that are coming into the chat, and I wanted to ask you some of them. One, some people asked the question about what inspired you to dedicate a career to horticulture. They wanted to know a little bit more about your personal story.
Sure. You know, I grew up in India, and my family has all been like, we've all had farms, and my family had coffee. We grew coffee and paddy, rice paddy, all sorts of agricultural crops. And then my mom was a avid nature lover. She loved growing in the garden, growing orchids and plants. She loved birds and animals. So I think from a young age, I think the whole surrounded with people who love plants and nature was what probably inspired me to go into horticulture. And I have a uncle who's a really a famous agricultural scientist in India, who was working with Norman Borlaug. He brought about the Green Revolution in India, which allowed India to go from a famine society, a country that always was inflicted with famines, to the Green Revolution was able to eliminate famine in India. So I think a lot of the agricultural background is what took me to horticulture. And then I came to the US to do my master's, and then eventually did also my PhD at the University of Colorado, working on coffee genetic resources. So my whole thing is, you know, plants. I love all sorts of plants, but also love cultivating plants. And every year I always grow a vegetable garden, and nothing like growing vegetables in your own garden. They taste so much better when you grow them. So yeah, so I think throughout my life, I have been surrounded with plants and agriculture.
That's a great story. It's good to understand how people end up in certain careers. One thing that we're focused on from a choral perspective, from this Colorado Resiliency Arts Lab, is really the well-being and preventing burnout and psychological distress in healthcare professionals and people that work around patients. A lot of the programs that you have could be adapted to healthcare professionals. Can you think of any ways that someone in healthcare could start down their journey to using nature, horticultural therapy, either individually or collectively, to help with some of the stress that we deal with in the hospital?
Yeah, definitely. You know, I think, you know, for me, I personally, I have such a busy schedule. I get stressed, but not the stress that healthcare professionals have. But for me, when I get up in the morning, I take my cup of coffee, I go sit in my backyard where I can hear the birds chirping, and just the leaves in the wind, the leaves, the aspen leaves shimmering and all of that. So when I'm drinking my coffee, I don't take my phone outside. I just sit for a few minutes. The first thing in the morning, I start my morning by sitting outside and listening to nature and what's happening. and even just close your eyes and listen to the birds sing. That can, when you start your day thinking, so you get refreshed first thing in the morning. And then you can take that throughout the day and during the middle of the day. Hospitals, I would encourage all the hospitals to create gardens for not just patients, but also for the people working in the hospitals. So taking a break and going into the garden and just enjoying a garden in the middle of the day would be, and if they have the time, if any of the nurses and healthcare professionals have time to create your own garden, I would suggest a vegetable garden and growing your own vegetables and eating that, the fruit of your labor. You always are, you're surprised when you grow how much a small garden can yield. And I think those are all great ways to do individually.
Yeah, no, I think, and there's if you know a lot more about this than I do, but it doesn't take a lot of time, right, Sarada? It's 10, 15 minutes in a garden can kind of take care of a lot of your acute stress.
Yes.
Do I remember that correctly, or?
Yes, correct. Yeah, you don't have to spend a lot of time, even just in the middle of the day. If you get a 10-minute break, just go sit in a garden and listen to what's happening. But be involved. Don't take the stress with you. And so that's why I want to know that nature walk that I did, if it calmed down people or not.
It calmed me down, and I've had a stressful day, so I enjoyed it. There are a few places it's interesting to me. I have colleagues that work at Duke in North Carolina, and their hospital is right next to the Duke Botanical Gardens. And it's just the way it was set up. And a lot of people do exactly what you said. And they take a break in the middle of the day and go walk through the gardens and find that peaceful space. Mm-hmm. It allows them to be able to get back to their job.
Yes.
So I do wish that other hospitals and other healthcare facilities had that. Another interesting question that came up was, do you believe that we gravitate to certain environments or types of gardens, or do you believe there's a commonality in what we think is attractive?
It's all perception. The thing is, we have native gardens, we have formal gardens. So I think it's individual preference. And some people may just prefer a nature hike, going up into the mountains and taking a hike that you are also being in nature and surrounded by trees and sounds of the forest. So I think it would be individual preference and what type of garden you like. And so there is merit to both. The European formal gardens are attractive to some where it's annuals, and as native gardens, which have a much wilder naturalistic look, are also attractive. And also for us, when we do our gardens, we are always looking for 4-season interest. And that's one thing people mistake, that gardening is only during a certain season. But even in the winter, the gardens are beautiful because when you walk, you see the pines or spruces covered in snow, and there is so much beauty to that also. So I think it's all we need to learn to observe. And I think we tend to, when we see greenery, that is what is called plant blindness. So there is a whole discipline talking about plant blindness, where we see that greenery all around us that we don't pay attention or notice. And so it is taking the time to notice what you are surrounded by. And there are differences. It doesn't all green, but there are different variations of green. There are different leaf shapes, leaf sizes. And so taking the time to look at those and enjoying and appreciating that, I think, is what matters.
And how much of it is being in the environment and walking, going on a hike, and how much of it do you think is really getting your hands dirty into the soil?
So, from the research, I think there are both types of activities. People who are really engaged, there are benefits to it. But when you are physically, you don't have the capacity to do it, just being engaged, just walking through a garden and not really participating in an activity. So there is the passive and active. So both have benefits. The passive engagement is also beneficial.
That's great. many people are asking, would we be able to share your slides, share the presentation? This presentation is being recorded. I typed it into the chat, but to also let people know, if you go to our website, it's the CORAL website. CORAL stands for the Colorado Resiliency Arts Lab. It's sponsored by the National Endowment of the Arts. And if you type that Colorado Resiliency Arts Lab into Google, you'll find our website, and Dr. Krishnan's presentation will be listed and available to review early next week. So I just wanted people to know that. And people ask, this is great, will the slides be available in Europe so that we're having an international representation here? And the answer is yes. The internet, thank goodness, goes everywhere and will be available for everybody. How do you think we can introduce this and get these ideas out to people? It seems like there's very good evidence that it's beneficial, and I think we all notice that, especially those of us that live in a rural-ish area. I go to the botanical gardens, the stress goes away. I go on a hike, the stress goes away. How do we disseminate and implement these programs more widely? And what are some of the barriers that you've run into in different populations of people?
I think one of the challenges has been with healthcare facilities because, it is a clean environment. And when you consider hospital rooms as clean, and you don't want plants in the hospital rooms itself because of, you have the soil, which is dirty, and then you water them. And so it could have water leaking from the pots. And so you want a medical room to be very clean. So maybe, hospitals, having gardens and having windows that patients can look out from the windows into those gardens would be beneficial. And even it is not, the patients are there, and then in the waiting room, you have family waiting for a surgical position. And even for those family members who are being stressed, having gardens in hospitals for people to go and sit outside for a minute or so. So those are all great. I think so there are botanic gardens in all major cities, and botanic gardens can work with hospitals in talking about how can we bring our therapeutic horticulture programs to the hospitals and even help create gardens within the hospitals or nursing care, whatever nursing care facilities, elderly facilities.
Absolutely. Another question that's going to come up is, how do you feel the virtual types of gardens that you showed us and things that you can see online, as opposed to, as you said, actually walking outside, being in the garden? How does it replicate it pretty well? Is it not quite the same, but better than nothing? How's the virtual side of things translate?
Definitely if you're in person doing something or experiencing something, it's so much better because the virtual is, last year when people could not go out and when the gardens were closed, that is an alternative. But I would say that being immersed in that is probably the best way. But it can be, the virtual ones are a good substitute, but I would not take away the actual experience itself.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to take away the Denver Botanic Gardens and just have a virtual thing. It's such a wonderful place to go to. Another question that came along was along those lines, how do we fund programs like this? This person works with the community health centers that don't have extra funding lying around to plant and maintain gardens. So do you have any suggestions of how people can try to get these programs going and get them funded?
Sure. One good resource could be the Colorado Garden and Home Show Foundation. So the Colorado Garden and Home Show does fund a lot of community gardens, gardens in the community, school gardens. So I would recommend, I know it's typically by August, you need to put a letter of intent, and then you will be asked to submit a full application. So I would recommend the Colorado Garden and Home Show is a really good place for small gardens in the community.
That's great. That's great advice. Another interesting question is, what about the smell of landscapes? This person Tracy Culp Harrison says that she misses certain smells of grass and cotton and dirt when away for too long. Is there research into this? About the
A smell is
smells?
also a very good. I mean, it's a sensory, as part of a sensory garden, we also focus on smell because there may be smells that can evoke smells from your childhood. And so that is like when we work with adult populations, the aging population, it brings back memories of their childhood when they certain smells. So it's always good to incorporate those kind of sensory features in your garden too.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're right. We talked about this in other forums about like music therapy, where you hear a certain song and it transports you back to a different time. And I think you're absolutely right that certain smells and being in certain gardens, it can often, or certain natural environments, transport you in a good way back to a special time of your childhood.
Yes.
One thing I think a lot, the smell of rain,
Yes.
things like that is really often a special
Yeah.
feeling for people.
Yeah.
Kelly Redard just shares that the University of Denver has a beautiful community garden, and perhaps there'd be some space on the campus to do something similar. So there's a suggestion for people of what things they can do. The one last question I have, or one of the last questions, if there are others, is that do we know specifically on a neurobiological basis, what is it about being in nature that relieves stress? In other words, is it the colors? Is it the smell? It's probably going to be all. Is it the shape of things? Do we know? And the example I always give is people watch the sunset, and it doesn't matter where you are, what community, what part of the world, that is always something where people just go, oh, that is so beautiful. Do we understand what's going on in the brain when people see nature that causes the stress reduction?
I think it goes back, as I started the presentation, it goes back when I was talking about the evidence, and it goes back to our evolutionary history, because as hunter-gatherers, we were a part of nature. So the thing is, what we do as humans is we remove ourselves from nature, and we see us not being part of nature and everything else, the animals and plants being nature. But we are also a biological being and part of nature. And that's where that biophilia, where we have that innate connection with all other living things. And I think that's where we are. And we have removed ourselves from it when we became away from nature and started building cities and congregating in large populations in cities. We have removed ourselves from nature, and we have this need to be in nature. And you can't remove it. Evolution takes so many millennia, and it's going to be hard to take us. And when we are deprived of it, that's when we feel stressed. So I think we are programmed as biological beings. We are programmed to be one with nature, and we should consider ourselves, we are part of nature and we are not removed from it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, Sarada, that people talk about how advanced our civilization or cultures are. And I think people need to get away from it all when they go on vacation. And
Yes.
not everybody, but people go on vacation, they go usually to natural environments. They sit on a beach, they go up into the mountains to get away from it. And I think there is something that's very innate about the need for nature. So I just want to thank you for participating in our series. This was a wonderful lecture. It was really interesting. I look forward to seeing what new programs the Denver Botanic Gardens comes up with. And as I said, I love walking through the Botanic Gardens, and I would recommend anybody, when you're having a stressful day or even just want to do something different, go to the Botanic Gardens. It's a wonderful place, and it's transformative. You're in Denver or any Botanic Gardens around the world. You're in a city or wherever, and you go to the Botanic Gardens, and it's magical. It's transformative. It's like you've walked into a different time zone. or a different era. It's transformative. So I want to thank you for all you do for the Botanic Gardens, for participating in our program. And I want to thank all the participants for calling in from around the world. Our next speaker is Dr. Let me pull it up. Is Dr. Jess Bone. She is a research fellow in epidemiology and statistics at the University College of London. It will be on September 17th at the exact same time. And she will be talking about understanding of population level public health benefits of the arts. One thing I can tell you, in the United Kingdom, if I understand it correctly, physicians can write prescriptions for their patients to go to the symphony, to go to a play, maybe go to the Botanic Gardens. And I think we're going to learn a lot about Dr. Bone's presentation. So I encourage you to come back for the next presentation in 2 months in September. But Dr. Krishnan, thank you so much for participating. I really enjoyed the lecture, and I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Bye.